September 12, 1944. Near Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Second Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon prepare for patrol. 28 men from Easy Company, 28th Infantry Division. They were checking rifles, adjusting packs, tightening bootlaces. Morning fog hung between the pine trees. The air smelled of wet earth and diesel fuel from idling trucks half a mile behind the American lines. Holloway was 23 years old. West Point graduate. 6 months in Europe. His service record showed competence but not distinction. Other officers in the battalion called him careful. Some used different words when they thought he could not hear them. Hesitant. Overcautious. Timid. The 28th Infantry Division had been fighting through France since June. Brutal combat in the bocage hedgerows. House-to-house fighting in small villages. Constant casualties. The division had pushed across the German border in early September. Now they faced the Siegfried Line, the concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier. Battalion intelligence reported light German resistance in the forest ahead. Scattered Wehrmacht units retreating toward prepared positions. The patrol mission was straightforward. Move 3 kilometers east along the logging road. Observe German movements. Report back before nightfall. Simple reconnaissance. No combat expected. Captain Richard Morrison briefed the patrol at 0630 hours. Morrison commanded Easy Company. He had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. Survived 3 months of fighting. Earned a Silver Star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position near St. Lo. He was aggressive. Confident. He believed in pressing the enemy hard. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the forest. Move fast. Stay on the road. Speed was more important than caution. The Germans were disorganized. Running. This was the time to pursue them aggressively. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and get back. Holloway studied the map. The logging road ran through thick forest for 3 kilometers. Dense pine trees on both sides. Limited visibility off the road. Higher ground to the north and south. Natural choke points where the road narrowed between rocky outcrops. It looked vulnerable. He asked Morrison about flanking security. Should they send men through the forest parallel to the road to watch for ambush? Morrison said no. That would slow them down. The intelligence assessment indicated minimal German presence. Scattered remnants. No organized units. No need for elaborate precautions. Just take the road and complete the mission. Holloway suggested splitting the platoon. Half on the road, half in the trees. Morrison rejected the idea. That would divide their firepower. If they encountered resistance, they needed concentrated force. Keep the platoon together on the road. Move quickly. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any opposition. Other officers were listening to the conversation. Lieutenant Frank Chen from Fox Company made a comment. Said something about hoping Holloway would not turn this into another delay. Chen had been critical of Holloway before. 2 weeks earlier, Holloway had postponed an attack on a German position because his scouts reported machine gun emplacements. Chen had called it unnecessary hesitation. Later reconnaissance confirmed the machine guns were there, but Chen never acknowledged that. Morrison gave the final order. Take the logging road. No flankers. Move at combat speed. Complete the reconnaissance by 1400 hours. Return by nightfall. Those were the instructions. Clear and direct. Holloway returned to his platoon. Sergeant William Hayes was waiting. Hayes was 31 years old. Regular Army before the war. Veteran of North Africa and Sicily. Experienced. Reliable. He asked Holloway about the route. Holloway showed him the map. Hayes studied it for a moment. Then he looked up. Sir, that road is perfect for an ambush. Holloway agreed. Too perfect. The Germans had been fighting in Europe for 5 years. They knew how to set up killing zones. A straight road through thick forest with high ground on both sides. Classic ambush terrain. Any Wehrmacht officer would recognize it. Hayes suggested the same thing Holloway had proposed to Morrison. Send flankers through the forest. Have them move parallel to the road, 50 yards on each side. They could watch for German positions while the main body advanced on the road. If anything happened, the flankers could provide supporting fire from the trees. Holloway wanted to do it. It made tactical sense. But Morrison had given explicit orders. No flankers. Stay on the road. Move fast. Those were the instructions. Disobeying them would be insubordination. The other platoon leaders in Easy Company followed orders without question. Lieutenant Robert Dalton led 1st Platoon. He was aggressive like Morrison. Never questioned orders. Always attacked directly. The men liked him because he led from the front. He had been wounded twice and returned to duty both times. Lieutenant Thomas Bradford commanded 3rd Platoon. Quieter than Dalton but equally aggressive. Bradford believed in violence of action. Hit the enemy hard and keep hitting until they broke. He had grown up hunting in Montana. Said combat was not much different from tracking elk. Find them fast and take the shot. Both Dalton and Bradford thought Holloway was too careful. They said it in the officers' mess. Said he overthought things. Made simple operations complicated with excessive planning. War was not about caution. It was about momentum. Aggressive units won battles. Hesitant units died slowly. Holloway heard what they said. He knew his reputation. The cautious lieutenant. The one who always saw problems. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. More preparation. More time. The other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. But Holloway had read history. He knew how many units had been destroyed by ambushes in forests. The Teutoburg Forest. Where 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes. The Ypres salient. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. The Philippine jungles. Where Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Every one of those disasters had the same characteristics. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Inadequate reconnaissance. Predictable movement patterns. Failure to anticipate enemy planning. The commanders who died in those ambushes were not stupid. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on incomplete information. Holloway did not want to make those errors. But he also did not want to be the lieutenant who disobeyed orders and got court-martialed. 2nd Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon prepare for officers who questioned orders created 28 men from Easy Company, 28th Infantry Division. He told Hayes they would follow Morrison's instructions, tightening bootlaces. Stay on the road. Morning fog hung between the pine trees. Move quickly. The air smelled of wet earth and diesel fuel from idling trucks half a mile behind the American lines. He was a sergeant. Holloway was 23 years old. He followed orders too. West Point graduate. But his face showed what he thought about this 6 months in Europe. They were walking into danger with their eyes closed because some captain wanted them to move fast. Other officers in the battalion called him careful. 4 or 5 hours. Some used different words when they thought he could not hear them. 28 men in a column formation. Hesitant. Riflemen, overcautious, automatic riflemen, timid, 2-bar teams, 1 bazooka team, Infantry Division 1 radio operator. Fighting through France since June. Standard infantry patrol. Brutal combat in the bocage. They walked down the dirt road into the forest. House-to-house fighting in small villages. The morning sun broke through the fog. Constant casualties. Light division had pushed across the German border in early September. Birds called from the trees. Now they faced the Siegfried Line, muddy from recent concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier. Other American patrols had passed. Battalion intelligence reported light German resistance in the forest ahead. Behind the point scattered Wehrmacht units retreating toward prepared positions. He could see 30 yards forward where the road curved straight between trees. Moved 3 kilometers east along the logging road. He kept looking at the forest on both German movements. Watching for movement back before nightfall. Listening for sounds that did not reconnaissance. Nothing unusual expected. Just Captain Richard Morrison and morning patrol at 0630. The forest was quiet except for their footsteps. Morrison commanded Easy Company. The men were relaxed. He had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. This seemed like a routine patrol. Survived 3 months of fighting. No enemy contact expected. Earned a silver star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position where the road narrowed. He was aggressive. Rocky outcrops on both sides. Confident. Steep slopes covered with the enemy pine trees. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight 200 yards long. Move perfect fast. Ambush site. Stay on the road. Holloway felt his chest tighten as they more important than caution. He considered stopping. The Germans were disorganized, sending scouts up the slopes to check for enemy positions. This was the time to pursue them aggressively. But Morrison's orders were clear. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and get back. Keep moving. Holloway studied the map. Do not waste time on excessive caution. The logging road ran through thick forest. The intelligence assessment said the Germans were retreating. Dense pine trees on both sides. Not setting ambushes. Limited visibility off the road. Holloway gave the signal to continue. Higher ground to the north and south. The platoon entered the defile. Natural choke points where the road narrowed into the narrow passage between the rock walls. It looked vulnerable. If anything was waiting up there in those trees, about flanking they were walking into a killing zone with should no they send men through the forest parallel to the road to watch for ambush. Nothing happened. Morrison said no. The defile without incident. That would slow them down. The road opened up again. The intelligence assessment indicated minimal German presence. Holloway exhaled slowly. Scattered remnants. Maybe the intelligence was right. No organized units. Maybe the Germans really were just running. For elaborate precautions. Maybe his caution was just unnecessary. Take the road and complete the mission. They continued. Holloway suggested splitting the platoon. 2 kilometers completed. Half on the road, 1 kilometer remaining to the reconnaissance Morrison rejected the idea. The mission was going smoothly. That would divide their firepower. No problems. If they encountered resistance, no contact. They needed concentrated everything force. According to plan. Keep the platoon together on the road. Moved up beside Holloway. Move quickly. Sir, complete the mission before the Germans could organize Holloway any asked what he meant. Other officers were listening to the conversation. Could not explain it. Lieutenant Frank just an instinct company made a comment. Too quiet. Said something about hoping Holloway would not turn this into another delay. The Germans did not give up territory this easily. Chen had been critical of Holloway not even when they were retreating. 2 weeks earlier, they always left something behind. An attack on a German position because his scouts reported machine gun emplacements. Snipers. Chen had called it unnecessary hesitation. Later reconnaissance confirmed the machine guns were there, but Chen never acknowledged forest and a dirt road and 28 Americans gave the final order. Germany like they were on a training exercise back in Georgia. No flankers. They reached the final kilometer. Move at combat speed. The reconnaissance objective was a crossroads where the logging road intersected with a main highway running by nightfall. Battalion wanted to know if German vehicles were using that highway. Holloway returned to his platoon. What type? Sergeant Information Hayes was waiting the next phase of the advance. Hayes was 31 years old. Holloway could see the crossroads ahead through before the war. About 400 yards distant and Sicily. Open area where the forest thinned out. Reliable. He signaled the platoon to slow down. Holloway about the route. They were approaching the objective. Holloway showed him the map. Time to be more careful. Hayes studied it for a moment. That was when Private First Class Robert Chen, the lead scout, that road is perfect for an ambush. Raised his fist. Holloway agreed. The signal for danger. Too perfect. Everyone froze. The Germans had been fighting in Europe for 5 years. Then he slowly moved his arm to indicate something ahead. A straight road. Holloway moved forward with high ground on both sides. When he reached Chen, he saw what ambush terrain. Any Wehrmacht officer would recognize fresh. Hayes suggested the same thing Holloway had proposed to Morris, crossing the logging road from flankers through the forest. Made recently. Have them move parallel to the road. Within the past 50 yards on each side. The mud was still soft. They could watch for German positions while the main body advanced. Holloway studied the tracks. If anything happened, at least 10 men, the flankers could provide supporting fire from the trees. They had crossed the road. Holloway wanted into the forest on the north side. It made tactical sense. Heading toward the higher ground, Morrison had given explicit orders. He looked back at his platoon. Stay on the road. Standing on an exposed road in enemy territory with German soldiers somewhere in the forest around them. Disobeying them would be intelligence assessment had been wrong. The other platoon leaders were not just scattered remnants without question. Lieutenant Robert Dalton led 1st Platoon, moving with purpose. He was aggressive like setting Morrison. Up positions. Never questioned orders. Always attacked directly. The men liked him because he led from the front. He had been wounded twice and returned to duty both times. Lieutenant Thomas Bradford commanded 3rd Platoon. Quieter than Dalton but equally aggressive. Bradford believed in violence of action. Hit the enemy hard and keep hitting until they broke. He had grown up hunting in Montana. Said combat was not much different from tracking elk. Find them fast and take the shot. Both Dalton and Bradford thought Holloway was too careful. They said it in the officers' mess. Said he overthought things. Made simple operations complicated with excessive planning. War was not about caution. It was about momentum. Aggressive units won battles. Hesitant units died slowly. Holloway heard what they said. He knew his reputation. The cautious lieutenant. The one who always saw problems. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. More preparation. More time. The other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. But Holloway had read history. He knew how many units had been destroyed by ambushes in forests. The Teutoburg Forest. Where 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes. The Ypres salient. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. The Philippine jungles. where Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Every one of those disasters had the same characteristics. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Inadequate reconnaissance. Predictable movement patterns. Failure to anticipate enemy planning. The commanders who died in those ambushes were not stupid. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on incomplete information. Holloway made a decision that would define everything that followed. Near Hürtgen Forest, he ordered the platoon to withdraw 100 yards back down the road. James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon defensive positions. Radio men from Easy Contact Battalion, 28th Infantry Division. Report German presence. They were checking new orders, adjusting packs. Hayes directed the men into the forest on the south side of the road. Fog hung between the pine trees. They spread out in a defensive perimeter. The air smelled of wet earth covering positions facing north and east, half a mile behind the American lines. Good fields of fire. Holloway was natural cover behind trees and rocks. West Point graduate. Within 2 minutes, the 6 months was dug in. His service operator tried to reach battalion headquarters. Other officers in the battalion called him careful. He tried again. Some used different words when they thought he could not hear them. The forest and terrain were blocking the signal. They were beyond effective radio range. Timid. Isolated. The 28th Infantry Division Holloway had been fighting the situation since June. They could continue combat in the crossroads. Hedgerows. Complete the original fighting in small villages. But those German tracks indicated organized enemy activity ahead. The division had pushed across the German border without knowing what was waiting seemed unwise. Now they faced the Siegfried Line, to American lines and fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier. That was the safe option. Battalion intelligence reported given German resistance in the forest ahead. Complete the reconnaissance. Scattered Wehrmacht units determined enemy activity at the crossroads. The patrol mission was without that information would look like failure. Move 3 kilometers east along the logging road. Hayes suggested observe German movements. Send 2 scouts before nightfall through the forest. Simple reconnaissance. Avoid the road completely. No combat expected. Let them observe the crossroads. Captain Richard Morrison briefed the patrol. Meanwhile, the main body stays in defensive positions ready to support commanded easy if needed. He had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. That made tactical sense. Survived 3 months of fighting. Get the information without exposing the Silver Star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position for the scouting mission. He was Private First Class Robert Chen and Private Dennis Walsh. He believed in pressing the enemy hard. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the forest. Chen and Walsh removed their packs. Move fast. Took only rifles, on the road, ammunition, and binoculars. Speed was more important than caution. They moved into the forest. The Germans were disorganized. They would circle around through the trees. This was the time to pursue them aggressively. Unexpected direction. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and get back. Estimated time. Holloway studied the map. The rest of the platoon ran through thick forest for 3 kilometers. Adjusted pine trees on both sides. Watched the forest. Limited visibility off the road. Nobody spoke. Higher ground to the north. The tension was different now. Natural choke points where the road narrowed between rocky outcrops. Holloway thought about Morrison's reaction when they returned late. He asked Morrison about mission security. Morrison would not be through the forest parallel to the road. He would see it as another example of Holloway's excessive caution. No. That would slow them down. Second Lieutenant James Holloway lacked the aggressive mindset minimal German effective combat leadership. Scattered remnants. But Holloway had seen those German organized units. Fresh tracks for elaborate precautions. Multiple soldiers. Just take the road and complete the mission. Holloway suggested splitting the situation. Half intelligence assessments were just estimates. Morrison rejected the presence was fact. That would divide their facts contradicted estimates. If they encountered resistance, they needed concentrated force. That was basic military doctrine. Keep the platoon together on the road. Move quickly. 50. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any crossroads by now. Other officers were listening to the conversation. Should be heading Frank Chen from Fox Company, but they had not returned. Said something about hoping Holloway would not turn this into another delay. 2 possibilities. Chen had been critical of Holloway were still observing, gathering detailed information. Holloway had postponed or they had encountered German position because his scouts reported machine gun emplacements. Capture. Chen had called it unnecessary hesitation. No way to know. Later Hayes suggested sending another pair of scouts to look for them, but Chen never acknowledged that. Holloway considered it. Morrison gave the final order. 4 men at risk instead of 2. Take the logging road. And it would further reduce the defensive strength of the main combat speed. They needed to complete the reconnaissance by 1400 hours. Still no scouts. By nightfall. The situation was deteriorating. Clear Holloway made another decision. Holloway returned to his platoon to withdraw to the previous defensive position. Sergeant William Hayes was waiting. The D-file they had passed 31 years old back. Regular defensive before the war. Veteran of North Africa and Sicily. Clear fields of fire along the road. Reliable. If Chen and Walsh were captured or killed, about the Germans would know an American patrol was in the area. Hayes studied it for a moment, made them vulnerable. Then he looked up. Some of the men looked surprised when Holloway gave the withdrawal order. They had been trained to advance, not retreat. Too perfect. But Hayes understood the Germans had been fighting in Europe for 5 years. He got the platoon moving. They knew how to set up killing zones. They left one 4-man team in the current position to watch for the thick forest with high ground on both sides. The rest pulled back toward the defile. Classic ambush terrain. They moved carefully. Any Wehrmacht officer in the trees parallel to the road rather than walking on the exposed surface. Hayes suggested the same thing Holloway had proposed to Morrison. Watching for enemy contact. Send flankers through the forest. It took 20 minutes to cover the 2 kilometers. Move parallel to the road. They were being much more cautious now than during the initial advance. They could watch for German positions while the main body advanced on established defensive positions. If anything happened, the flankers could provide supporting fire from the trees. Good fields of fire in both directions. It made tactical sense, protecting them from direct fire. But Morrison had given explicit orders. This was a defensible position. No flankers. If they had to fight, stay on the road. Where they could do it effectively. Move fast. Holloway sent Hayes back to the forward position with 3 men to remain the observation team and keep watching for Chen and Walsh. The other platoon leaders in easy company followed orders without question. If the scouts had not returned by then, assumed they were compromised. He was aggressive like Morrison. Everyone would withdraw back to American questioned orders. Hayes always attacked directly. The men liked him because he led from the front. Veterans who knew how to walk without making duty both times. They disappeared into the trees. Lieutenant Thomas Bradford commanded 3rd Holloway waited with the main body at the defile. Quieter than Dalton but equally aggressive. He was making decisions based on tactical assessment. In violence of action. German tracks. Hit the enemy hard, missing scouts until they broke. Compromised mission. He had grown up hunting in Montana. These were facts. Said combat was not much different from tracking elk. Another delay. Fast and take the shot. Moreover caution. Both Dalton and Bradford thought that Lieutenant Holloway could not be trusted with independent command. They said in the officers' mess. The reputation would get worse. He overthought things. Other officers made simple operations complicated with excessive planning. Would definitely have something to say. War was not about caution. Probably call it another example of Holloway's timid leadership. Aggressive units won battles. Eventually, it might affect his career. Hesitant units died slowly. Officers who were seen as lacking aggressiveness got sidelined. He knew his reputation. Given support roles. The cautious lieutenant. Never promoted. The one who never given command of larger units, who always wanted more reconnaissance. Did not matter if the platoon got destroyed in an ambush. More time. Holloway had read enough history to know that aggressive commanders made mistakes necessary for combat leadership. Custer at Little Bighorn. But Holloway had charging into unknown terrain without adequate reconnaissance had been destroyed by ambushes. Getting his entire command annihilated. The Teutoburg Forest. Custer had been aggressive, where 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes. But 268 men died because of his decisions. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. The Philippine jungles. Where Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Every one of those disasters had the same characteristics. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Inadequate reconnaissance. Predictable movement patterns. Failure to anticipate enemy planning. The commanders who died in those ambushes were not stupid. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on incomplete information. Holloway was not going to let his reputation push him into tactical stupidity. Near Hürtgen Forest, Germany. If that made him seem timid, Second Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon rifle fire erupted from the east. 28 men from Easy Company, 28 Infantry Division, of American M1 Garand they were and checking German rifles, 98 adjusting packs, tightening bootlaces. The sound echoed through the forest. Morning fog hung between Hayes the pine and his trees. Team were in contact. The air smelled of Holloway wet earth grabbed the radio fuel from idling trucks half a mile behind Hayes on the platoon frequency. Holloway was 23 years old. West Point graduate. Then a brief transmission. 6 months in Europe. Hayes's voice. His service record showed competence partially broken, but not distinction. Contact. Other officers in the battalion called him pulling back. Some used different words when they thought he could not hear them. Holloway waited, hesitant. Nothing else came through. Overcautious. Hayes was under fire. The 28th Infantry Division had been fighting through France since June. The situation had just become a combat action. House-to-house fighting in small villages. Everyone stays in defensive positions. The division had pushed across the German border in early September. Be ready now for enemy contact. The Siegfried Line, the concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier. No battalion intelligence reported light German resistance in the forest ahead. Riflemen tightened their grip on their weapons. Scattered Wehrmacht units retreating toward prepared positions. Checked their fields of fire. The patrol mission was straightforward. Team position to cover the road. Move 3 kilometers they were along the logging road. 5 minutes later, observed German movements. Running through the forest before nightfall. His simple reconnaissance. 4 men. No combat expected. All moving fast. Captain Richard Morrison briefed the patrol at 0 behind the rocks. 0 hours. Hayes was breathing hard. Morrison commanded Easy Company. Blood on his left sleeve. He had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. Not serious, survived 3 months of fighting. Hayes reported what happened. Earned a Silver Star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position near St. Lo. Found it empty. He was aggressive. The 4-man team that had been left there was gone. He believed in pressing the enemy hard. No blood. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the forest. They had started searching the area when German soldiers opened fire from the north. Stay on the road. At least 20 enemy infantry in the trees. The Germans were disorganized. Hayes's team returned fire and broke contact. This was the time to pursue them aggressively. Withdrew back to the defile under covering fire. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and get back. Holloway asked about Chen and Holloway studied the map. Hayes shook his head. The logging road ran through thick forest for 3 kilometers. Could not tell if they had been captured or trees or were hiding somewhere in the forest. Limited visibility. But the forward area was now confirmed to be higher ground to the organized German forces. Natural choke points where the road narrowed between rocky outcrops. The Germans had not retreated. It looked vulnerable. They had set up positions covering the crossroads and the approaches. Should they send men through the forest parallel to the road to watch for ambush and the 4-man observation team? Morrison said no. Now they knew an American patrol was in the area. The intelligence they would be hunting for the rest of the German presence. Holloway made his next decision. No organized back to American lines. No need for elaborate further attempts to complete the reconnaissance mission. Just take the road and complete the mission. The situation had changed. Holloway suggested splitting the platoon. Getting his men back alive was now the priority. Morrison rejected the idea. Everyone moves west toward their friendly lines. If they encountered resistance off the road, they needed concentrated force. Move quietly. Keep the platoon together on the formation. Move Hayes quickly. Takes the rear guard. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any opposition. We leave now. Other officers were listening to the conversation. 24 men left out of the original Fox company made a comment. They did not know what happened to the other four, hoping Holloway would not turn this into another delay. The Germans were active in this area before. Staying meant fighting. Holloway had postponed an attack on a German position because his scouts reported machine tactical decision. Chen had called it unnecessary paralleling the logging road but staying later reconnaissance confirmed the machine guns were there, but slower than walking on the road but much safer. Morrison gave the final order. Half a kilometer without the logging road. Then Private James Sullivan, walking point, move at combat and signaled contact. Complete the reconnaissance by 1400 hours. Sullivan pointed ahead. Return by nightfall. Movement in the trees. Those were the instructions. Multiple figures. Clear and direct. German uniforms. Holloway returned to his platoon. At least a squad. Sergeant William Hayes was waiting. Moving Hayes west on roughly the same route as the American platoon. Regular army before the war. The two forces were on a collision course. Veteran of North Africa and Sicily. Experienced. Reliable. He asked Holloway about the route. Holloway showed him the map. Hayes studied it for a moment. Then he looked up. Sir, that road is perfect for an ambush. Holloway agreed. Too perfect. The Germans had been fighting in Europe for 5 years. They knew how to set up killing zones. A straight road through thick forest with high ground on both sides. Classic ambush terrain. Any Wehrmacht officer would recognize it. Hayes suggested the same thing Holloway had proposed to Morrison. Send flankers through the forest. Have them move parallel to the road, 50 yards on each side. They could watch for German positions while the main body advanced on the road. If anything happened, the flankers could provide supporting fire from the trees. Holloway wanted to do it. It made tactical sense. But Morrison had given explicit orders. No flankers. Stay on the road. Move fast. Those were the instructions. Disobeying them would be insubordination. The other platoon leaders in Easy Company followed orders without question. Lieutenant Robert Dalton led 1st Platoon. He was aggressive like Morrison. Never questioned orders. Always attacked directly. The men liked him because he led from the front. He had been wounded twice and returned to duty both times. Lieutenant Thomas Bradford commanded 3rd Platoon. Quieter than Dalton but equally aggressive. Bradford believed in violence of action. Hit the enemy hard and keep hitting until they broke. He had grown up hunting in Montana. Said combat was not much different from tracking elk. Find them fast and take the shot. Both Dalton and Bradford thought Holloway was too careful. They said it in the officers' mess. Said he overthought things. Made simple operations complicated with excessive planning. War was not about caution. It was about momentum. Aggressive units won battles. Hesitant units died slowly. Holloway heard what they said. He knew his reputation. the cautious lieutenant. The one who always saw problems. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. More preparation. More time. The other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. But Holloway had read history. He knew how many units had been destroyed by ambushes in forests. The Teutoburg Forest, where 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes. The Ypres salient, where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. The Philippine jungles, where Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Every one of those disasters had the same characteristics. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Inadequate reconnaissance. Predictable movement patterns. Failure to anticipate enemy planning. The commanders who died in those ambushes were not stupid. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on incomplete information. Holloway had seconds to 1944. They could engage the Hürtgen Forest, Germany, ambush them from concealment. Second Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon prepare for patrol. But gunfire would alert other German units in the area. 28th Infantry Division. They would be swarmed by reinforcements. They were checking rifles. They could try to slip away, tightening bootlaces. Let the Germans pass. Morning fog hung between the pine trees. But the German soldiers were experienced and diesel fuel from idling trucks half a mile behind the American force. Holloway was 23 years old. Happen anyway, but on the Germans' graduate. There was a third in Europe. One that would make his reputation even worse, but not distinction. But it was the tactically sound choice. In the battalion called him careful. Holloway ordered the platoon to shift different words when they thought he could not hear deeper into the forest away from the road. Put more distance between themselves and the German patrol. The 28th Infantry Division had been fighting through France since June. Let the Germans pass without knowing Americans in the bocage hedgerows. Some of the men looked fighting in small villages. They could see the enemy. Constant casualties. They had clear shots. The division had pushed across the German border in early September. But Hayes understood. Now they faced the Siegfried Line, moving the concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier. Carefully. Battalion intelligence reported light German resistance in the forest ahead. They made almost no sound. Scattered Wehrmacht units retreating toward prepared positions west. The patrol mission soldiers were not being particularly careful. Moved 3 kilometers east along the logging road. Moving at a regular pace on a known route. Report back they passed within 75 yards of the American position without detecting anything. No combat expected. After 5 minutes, Captain Richard Morrison briefed the patrol. Holloway let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Morrison commanded easy first contact. He had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. The platoon shifted back toward the logging road and continued west. Earned a Silver Star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position near St. Lo. Back in an area that should be relatively clear of German forces. He believed in pressing the enemy was not the same as is. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the German presence. Move fast. It might be wrong about everything. Stay on the road. They covered another kilometer. Speed was more important than caution. 4 kilometers from the crossroads. The Germans were disorganized. 2 kilometers from where they had started the patrol that morning. This was the time to pursue them almost back to the defensive perimeter. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and get back. Almost safe. Holloway studied the map. That was when they heard engines. The logging road ran through vehicle engines for 3 kilometers. Coming from the west. Dense pine trees on both sides. From the direction of American lines. Limited visibility. Multiple vehicles. Higher ground to the north and south. Tanks or trucks. Natural choke points where the road narrowed on the logging rocky outcrops. Holloway signaled everyone to take cover. He asked Morrison about flanking security. Watching the road. Should they send men through the forest parallel to the road to watch for ambush? The first vehicle Morrison said no. A German that would slow them down. SD, the intelligence assessment indicated minimal German presence. Carrying Wehrmacht scattered remnants. Open top. No organized unit. Machine gun mounted on the front. No need for elaborate precautions. 6 soldiers visible in the passenger compartment. Just take the road and complete the mission. More half-track Holloway suggested splitting the platoon. Then another. Half on the road. Then another. Half in the trees. 4 vehicles total. Morrison rejected the idea. Each carrying approximately 8 soldiers. That would divide their firepower. 32 German infantry moving east on the logging road. They needed concentrated force. Moving toward the American defensive positions together on the road. Holloway watched the convoy pass. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any opposition. Regular speed. Other officers were listening to the conversation. They did not expect to encounter American forces on this road. Said something about hoping Holloway would not turn this into another delay. Setting up a larger ambush for American units that would inevitably come down this road later today or postponed an attack on a German position because it disappeared around a curve machine gun emplacements. Holloway waited until the sound unnecessary hesitation. Then he made the calculation that terrified him more than anything else they had faced. But Shen never acknowledged that German convoy was heading directly toward Easy Company's defensive positions. Take the logging road. Morrison did not know the Germans were coming. Move at combat speed. He thought the enemy was retreating. Complete the reconnaissance by 1400 hours. He was about to be hit by a reinforced German force moving down the logging road that Morrison believed was clear. Holloway had to warn his platoon. But the radio still was waiting. The only way was 31 years to get back to American lines in regular army before the war. And the only fast route was the North Africa and Sicily. The same road that German convoy was now using. Reliable. If Holloway's platoon stayed off the road and moved through the forest, Holloway would take at least another 2 hours to reach Easy Company. He studied it for a moment. By then the Germans would have hit Morrison's positions. That road is perfect for an ambush. Overrun them. Men would die while Holloway was walking carefully through trees trying to avoid contact. The Germans had been fighting in Europe for 5 years. If they took the road, they could reach Easy Company in 30 minutes. A straight road through thick forest with high ground time to warn Morrison and organize a proper classic ambush terrain. Except using the road-marked officer would recognize it. If more German vehicles came along, Holloway they would be caught in the open. Send flankers through the forest. Hayes asked what Holloway wanted to do. Parallel to the road. The answer was obvious to both of them. They could watch for German positions while the main body advanced on the road. Speed was more important than the flankers could provide supporting fire. The tactical situation had reversed. Holloway wanted to do it. Holloway gave the order. It made tactical sense. Everyone on the road. But Morrison had given explicit orders. West toward friendly lines. Stay on the road. Stay alert. If we encounter more Germans, we fight. Disobeying them would be no more avoiding contact. The other platoon mission now was to warn Easy Company orders before the German attack hit. Lieutenant Robert Dalton emerged from the forest and got on the logging road. He was aggressive like Morrison. They started running. Never questioned combat equipment rattling. Always attacked boots directly. Pounding on the muddy surface. The men liked him because he led from men front. Sprinting west through enemy territory. He had been wounded twice and returned to duty broad daylight. It was the most aggressive thing Holloway had done since arriving in Europe. Quieter than Dalton, it was also the highest risk. Bradford believed in violence of action all morning. Hit the enemy hard instead of hitting until they broke. Morrison needed to know what was coming. Hunting in Montana. The convoy represented a serious threat to Easy Company's positions. Find them fast and take the shot. Other American units in the sector would be vulnerable. Thought Holloway was too careful. The entire battalion front said it in the officers' mess. They ran for 10 minutes. He overthought things. Covered over 1 kilometer. Made simple operations complicated. No German vehicles appeared. War was not about caution. They were about the convoy. Aggressive units won battles. But Holloway's legs died slowly. The men behind him were heard what they said. They had been patrolling for hours. The cautious lieutenant in full combat gear. The one who always saw problems. Endurance was becoming a factor. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. Called out. More preparation. Holloway looked ahead. The other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. Easy Company Holloway has read history. They had made how many units had been destroyed by ambushes in forests. The positions looked abandoned. The Teutoburg Forest. No one in the foxholes. Where 3 Roman legions were annihilated on the heavy weapons positions. The defense line was empty. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. The Philippine jungles. Where Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Every one of those disasters had the same characteristics. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Inadequate reconnaissance. Predictable movement patterns. Failure to anticipate enemy planning. The commanders who died in those ambushes were not stupid. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on incomplete information. Holloway slowed to a walk as they approached. Where was everybody? Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The positions had been fully manned. Second when Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of the dirt road watching his platoon prepare for patrol. Did the Germans already attack? 28 men from Easy Company, 28 Infantry Division. Then he saw movement in the trees north of the road. They were checking rifles, adjusting American soldiers, tightening bootlaces. Easy Company. Morning fog hung between the pine trees. Skirmish line formation. The air smelled of wet earth and diesel fuel from idling trucks from half a mile behind the American lines. Advancing toward Holloway the logging was 23 years old. Morrison was leading West Point graduate. Holloway called out. 6 months in Europe. Morrison stopped. His service record showed competence but not distinction. Saw Holloway and the platoon. Other officers in the battalion his face showed surprise. Some used different words when they thought he could not hear them. What was Holloway doing back already? Hesitant. The patrol was supposed to be at the crossroads gathering reconnaissance. The 28th Infantry Division had been fighting through France since June. Holloway ran toward Morrison. Brutal combat in the Bocage hedgerows. German forces fighting in small villages. Organized. Constant casualties. Strong. The division had pushed across the German border in early September, found German tracks. Now they faced the Siegfried Line, with enemy concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier. Moving east. Battalion intelligence reported light German resistance in the forest ahead. Coming down this road right units retreating toward prepared positions. 15 minutes behind us. The patrol mission was straightforward. Listened. His expression shifted from annoyance to concern. Observe German movements. He asked for details. Report back before nightfall. Holloway repeated everything. Simple reconnaissance. Fresh tracks. No combat expected. Missing scouts. Captain Richard German Morrison patrol moving patrol west. At 0630 the convoy on the road. Morrison commanded of organized enemy presence. He had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. Survived 3 months of fighting. Morrison looked at the logging road leading an assault on a German machine gun position near St. deployed in assault formation. He was aggressive. He had been about to advance down that road. He believed in taking his entire company into the forest in a broad sweep. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the forest. He would have walked straight into the ambush that was waiting at the crossroads. Stay on the road. Or worse, was more he would have met that German convoy head-on. The Germans were disorganized. On the road. This was the time to pursue them aggressive men. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and get back. But they were in movement formation. Holloway studied the map. Not prepared for a meeting engagement. The logging road ran through thick forest. The German half-tracks had vehicle-mounted machine guns. Dense pine trees on both sides. Superior firepower in a surprise limited visibility off the road. Easy Company would have taken ground to the north in the first 60 seconds. Natural choke points. Morrison gave new orders between rocky outcrops. Company back to defensive positions. He asked Morrison about flanking heavy weapons on the road. Should they send men guns through the forest parallel to the road to watch for everyone in cover? Morrison said no. For enemy contact. That would slow them down. Radio battalion. The intelligence assessment indicated minimal German logging road east of our position. Scattered remnants. Easy Company ran back to their organized units. The 57mm anti-tank guns were repositioned just to cover the road and complete the mission. Machine gun teams set up interlocking fields of fire. Within 5 minutes, half in the company was dug in and ready. Morrison rejected the idea. Waiting for the German convoy. That would divide their firepower. Morrison turned to Holloway. If they encountered resistance, why he had not completed the reconnaissance mission. Keep the platoon together on without reaching the crossroads. Move quickly. Those were the orders. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any opposition. Come back with information. Other officers were listening to the conversation. Holloway had come back early with incomplete intelligence. Frank Chen from Fox Company Holloway explained the decision process. Said something about hoping Holloway would not turn this into another delay. Missing scouts. Chen had been critical of organized enemy presence. 2 weeks earlier, the tactical situation postponed an attack on a German position continuing because forward scouts exposing the platoon into ambush. Withdrawing meant preserving the unit to report what they had found. Later reconnaissance confirmed the machine gun information about enemy activity was more valuable than detailed reconnaissance. Morrison gave the final order. Morrison was quiet for a moment. No flank. Then he said something Holloway did not expect. Speed. You made the right reconnaissance by 1400 Morrison hours. Said the German convoy proved Holloway's assessment was correct. Those were the instructions. The enemy was not retreating. Clear and direct. They were setting up positions. Holloway returned to his platoon. Using the forest and the road Sergeant to maneuver. William Hayes was waiting. If Holloway was 31 years old, crossroads, his platoon regular would have been destroyed before the war. Those 24 men North Africa right and now would be dead or captured. Experienced. More importantly, reliable. If Holloway had not withdrawn, he asked Holloway about he would not have observed the convoy. Holloway showed him the map. Would not have warned Easy Company. Hayes studied it for a moment. Morrison would have led the entire company into a meeting engagement with superior that road German is perfect for an ambush. The casualties would have been catastrophic. Morrison told Holloway to get his platoon into fighting in Europe for 5 years. They were part of the company line set up killing zones. When the Germans came down that road through thick forest with high ground on both sides. Not a moving ambush terrain. The tactical situation officer would recognize it. Holloway's platoon suggested the same thing Holloway had proposed to Morrison. They dug and sent flankers through the forest. Riflemen in foxholes. Have them move parallel to the road. Teams on the flanks. 50 yards on each side. The bazooka team position to engage German positions while the main body advanced on the placement. If everyone knew what was coming, the flankers could provide supporting fire from the trees. They would have the advantage. Holloway wanted to do 20 minutes later, artillery fire erupted east of their position. But Morrison had given explicit 105mm howitzers firing from behind the lines. Stay on the road. The battalion fire direction center was hitting the logging road. Those were the instructions. Morrison's call for fire. Disobeying them would be explosions rumbled through the forest. The other platoon leaders in Easy Company followed orders without question. The barrage lasted 5 minutes. Lieutenant Robert Dalton led first platoon. Morrison was aggressive like more to observe. Never questioned orders. Carefully down the road. Always attacked directly. They came back 10 minutes later. The men liked him because he led from the front. Vehicle wrecks. He had been wounded twice and returned to duty both times. The convoy had been caught by the artillery barrage. Thomas Bradford commanded 3rd platoon. At least 2 half-tracks destroyed. Quieter than Dalton but equally aggressive. On the road. Some survivors retreating of action. The German enemy hard and broken before it reached Easy Company's positions. He had grown up hunting in Montana. The battalion intelligence officer arrived at 1,500 tracking elk. Captain find them fast and take the shot. He wanted to know what happened. Both Dalton and Bradford thought Holloway was too careful. Showed him on the map where Holloway had found German tracks. Said he overthought where the patrol made contact. Made simple operations convoy was moving. With excessive planning. Bennett studied the information. War was not about caution. Then he said something that changed everything. Aggressive Germans had been planning a counterattack. Hesitant units died slowly. A coordinated assault on the American positions. He knew his reputation. Multiple units involved. The cautious lieutenant. The force at the crossroads. The one who always saw American attention. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. While the convoy came down the logging road and hit the American flank. The other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. It would have collapsed the battalion. But Holloway had read history. Holloway's patrol had discovered the operation had been destroyed by ambushes in forests. His decision to withdraw and report had prevented the American force from walking into a prepared annihilated by Germanic tribes. His observation of the convoy had given Easy Company time to prepare. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions, strike had destroyed the German mobile force before it could reach its objective. Where Japanese forces destroyed American units, why he withdrew instead of completing the original reconnaissance. Of those disasters had the same characteristics. Explained the decision. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Missing inadequate reconnaissance. German tracks. Predictable movement patterns. Tactical signs indicating organized to anticipate enemy planning. He assessed that returning with that information those ambushes were not reaching the crossroads. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on following the original orders would have resulted in the platoon's destruction and left Easy Company vulnerable to surprise attack. Adjusting the plan based on observed enemy activity was proper infantry doctrine. The mission was not to follow orders blindly. The mission was to gather intelligence and preserve the force. Holloway had done both. September 13, 1944. Near Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Battalion Commander Second Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon prepare for patrol. He wanted to review what happened on the logging road Easy Company, 28th Infantry Understand Division. The sequence of events. They were checking rifles, identify lessons learned, tightening bootlaces. Morrison presented the timeline. Morning fog hung between Holloway's the pine patrol trees. Departed at 0645 The air smelled of wet earth and diesel fuel from found German tracks half a mile behind the American lines. Made contact with enemy forces at 1,200 West Point graduate. Observed the German convoy at 1,330 His service record showed competence but not distinction. To Easy Company positions other officers in the battalion called him careful. Warned of approaching enemy words when they thought he could not artillery strike destroyed the convoy at 1,440 hours. Timid. Walsh asked about the decision to withdraw without completing had been fighting through France since June. Why did Holloway not push combat in the crossroads orders? That was the original mission in small villages. Complete the reconnaissance. Constant casualties. Report German activity. The division had pushed across the German border without reaching the objective. Now they faced the Siegfried Line. Holloway's concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western enemy presence. Battalion intelligence reported light German resistance in the forward positions. Scattered Wehrmacht situation indicated high probability of ambush. The patrol mission was straightforward. Would have exposed the platoon to unacceptable kilometers east along the logging road. Withdrawing preserved the force and allowed them to report intelligence that prevented a larger disaster. Before nightfall. Lieutenant Chen from Fox Company spoke up. No combat said expected. This was another example of Holloway's Captain Richard Morrison caution. Briefed the patrol at other officers would have pushed through to the objective. Morrison commanded the Easy Company. Not retreated landed at the first sign of difficulty. The patrol had not actually encountered German forces until they Silver Star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position near St. Lo. Maybe the mission could have been completed without problems. Confident. Walsh looked at Chen. He believed in pressing the enemy hard. Asked if he understood what Germans had told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the forest. Those vehicles came from somewhere. Move fast. They were part of an organized force. Stay on the road. They were not more important than caution. They were a coordinated element moving into attack positions. Running. If Holloway had the time to pursue them when that force deployed, his platoon would have been done quickly and get back. Cut off. Holloway studied the map. The logging road ran through thick forest for 3 kilometers. The German counterattack plan was on both sides. Multiple visibility off the road. Careful timing. Higher ground to the north and south. Terrain. It was not the work of disorganized retreating rocky outcrops. It was professional military planning executed by experienced Morrison about flanking security. Intelligence had underestimated the forest parallel to the road to watch for ambush. When it did, Morrison said no. Had to adapt. That would slow them down. Walsh asked the other platoon leaders what they would have assessment indicated minimal German Dalton from Easy Company 1st Platoon said honestly he probably would have pushed organized units. Tried to complete the mission. For elaborate precautions. He believed in aggressive action. Just take the road and complete the mission. Fast. Holloway suggested splitting the platoon. That was his instinct. Half on the road, Walsh asked what would have happened if Dalton had Morrison rejected the idea. German forces deployed. That would divide their firepower. Dalton thought about it. If they encountered resistance, would have fought. They needed concentrated force. Probably taken casualties. Keep the platoon together on the road. Maybe been overrun. Move quickly. But they would have fought. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any opposition. Aggressive instinct had value in listening to the conversation. But it was not appropriate for reconnaissance patrol. Made a comment. Reconnaissance was about gathering information and surviving this into another delay. Not about fighting had been critical of Holloway before. When a reconnaissance patrol detected enemy forces, Holloway had correct response was to withdraw and report because his scouts reported not machine gun emplacements. Holloway had followed correct unnecessary hesitation. He found evidence of enemy presence. Later reconnaissance confirmed the machine guns were there, the risk, but Chen never acknowledged that. He made a tactical decision to preserve his force. The final order what he knew. Take the logging road. That decision saved not just his platoon but potentially the entire company. Move at combat speed. If Easy Company had walked into that German ambush, casualties would have been severe. Return by nightfall. Perhaps catastrophic. Those were the instructions. Walsh directed the intelligence officer to revise the assessment of enemy forces. Holloway returned to his platoon. The Germans were not in disorganized retreat. Hayes was 31 years old. Deliberate withdrawal while preparing regular army before the war. Future patrols would be North Africa and Sicily. More caution. Experienced. Better reconnaissance. Reliable. Proper evaluation of enemy capabilities. Holloway showed him the map. He also directed that Lieutenant Holloway be commended for his tactical judgment. Then he looked up. His decisions prevented significant American casualties. Perfect for an ambush. That was the standard by which combat leadership should be evaluated. The Germans had been fighting in Europe for 5 years. Not following orders without question. They knew how to set up killing zones. After the meeting, Morrison spoke with high ground on both sides. Told him that classic ambush terrain had been wrong about the patrol plan. Any Wehrmacht officer would recognize pushing forward aggressively on that road suggested the same thing Holloway had proposed to Morrison. Morrison had let his preference for aggressive action override basic infantry to the road. 50 yards Holloway's caution had been vindicated. They could watch for German positions also while the main body advanced on the road. He had been critical of Holloway's careful approach. The flankers could provide supporting fire from the trees. Questioned his leadership style. It made Holloway's methods had proven correct. But Morrison had given explicit orders about terrain and enemy capabilities was not weakness. Stay on the road. It was professionalism. Move fast. Other officers in the battalion heard about the patrol. Disobeying them would be insubordination. The story of how Holloway's leaders in Easy Company followed orders without question. How the officer Robert Dalton led first platoon had prevented a battalion-level disaster. He was aggressive like Morrison. Lieutenant Chen never questioned orders. Did not apologize. Always attacked directly. But he stopped making critical comments about him because he led from the front. The evidence was clear. He had been wounded twice and returned to duty both times. Was the most aggressive thing you could do. Lieutenant Thomas Bradford commanded carefully when you did not understand the situation. Quieter than Dalton, but equally aggressive. It was intelligent. Bradford believed in violence of action. Told the enlisted men in the platoon hit the enemy hard and keep hitting until they broke. How Walsh had defended Holloway's hunting in Montana. How Morrison had was not much different from tracking out was flawed. Find them how fast the German counterattack would have succeeded if Holloway had followed orders exactly as given. Was too careful. The men understood what that meant. The officer's mess. They had been led by an officer who valued their lives more than his reputation. Made simple operations complicated with decisions based on tactical reality instead of aggressive caution. It was about them back alive when other officers might have gotten them killed pursuing impossible missions. Hesitant units died slowly. Private James Sullivan, Holloway heard what they said when they spotted the German patrol in his reputation, said something that captured the cautious lieutenant thought about Holloway. The one who always saw things about things. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. Not just follows orders or does what looks brave. More time. Figures out what the other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. The rest of the men agreed. But Holloway had read history. Seen enough war to know that aggressive officers sometimes got destroyed by ambushes in forests. Holloway's careful approach had kept them alive. Where that was more important than were annihilated by Germanic tribes. In the days that followed, the battalion conducted more patrols into the forest. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. More reconnaissance jungles. Flanking Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Artillery support Every one of those disasters had the same lessons from Holloway's patrol were applied overconfidence by the attacking force. The Germans continued defending the approaches to the Siegfried Line. Predictable the 28th Infantry Division fought through October to anticipate enemy planning. Brutal combat and the commanders who died in those ambushes were not some of the worst fighting in the European They were experienced military professionals who made heavy casualties during incomplete information. But they survived the initial engagements because Holloway's patrol had revealed the German defensive strategy. The intelligence allowed battalion planners to adjust their approach. Avoid obvious ambush sites. Use proper reconnaissance. Not assume the enemy was beaten just because intelligence said so. September 12 was killed in late October, leading an assault on a German bunker complex. Second Lieutenant James Holloway stood at the edge of a dirt road watching his platoon prepare for patrol. But he died making the kind of aggressive decision that aggressive officers 28th Infantry Division, charging a position that could have been by rifles, adjusting packs, Holloway attended the memorial service. Morning fog hung between the pine trees, but he also thought the air smelled of wet earth and diesel fuel from idling trucks half a mile behind the American lines. Survived the war. Holloway was 23 years old. During the Battle of the Bulge. West Point graduate, earned a distinguished service in Europe. His service record showed competence but not distinction. Years later, he wrote in his memoirs about the battalion called him careful. Mentioned Some used different words when they thought he initially thought Holloway was too cautious. Later realized that Holloway was actually the most tactically sound officer in the Infantry Division, had been fighting the one who understood that combat effectiveness was about achieving the objectives at minimum casualties. House to house fighting in demonstrating courage through aggressive action. Constant casualties. Holloway was promoted to first lieutenant in December 1940 in early September. Given command of the company after the previous commander was wounded, concrete fortifications protecting Germany's western frontier campaign and into Germany. Battalion intelligence reported light German resistance because they trusted his judgment. Scattered Wehrmacht units retreating toward prepared positions. He did not sacrifice lives. The mission was straightforward. He accomplished missions by thinking east along the logging thoroughly. Observed German movements. Holloway stayed in the army. Report back before nightfall. Made captain. Simple reconnaissance. Served in combat expected. Eventually Captain Richard Morrison briefed the patrol at 0630 hours. 21 years of military Morrison service. Commanded Easy Company. Multiple combat tours. He had landed at Utah Beach on numerous decorations. Survived 3 months of fighting. Everyone who served under him. Earned a Silver Star for leading an assault on a German machine gun position. Never wrote a memoir. Never gave interviews about the war. Confident. He was not the kind of officer who became a public figure. Morrison told Holloway to take the logging road straight through the forest. They told their children and grandchildren about the lieutenant who everyone called a coward until his decisions saved hundreds of lives. Speed was more important than caution. In military academies, the Germans were disorganized. The logging road patrol is taught as an example of proper reconnaissance. This was the time to pursue them aggressively. How to assess enemy presence. Get the reconnaissance done quickly and withdraw. Holloway studied the matters more than completing the logging road ran as originally forest for 3 kilometers. The case study is titled Dense Pine Trees on Both Sides. Holloway's Patrol, Limited Visibility off the Road. The central lesson to the north and south. Courage is not always about advance where the road narrowed between sometimes it is about stopping. It looked vulnerable. Making the decision about flanking security, but is actually the most intelligent response to the situation parallel to the road to watch for ambush. That kind of courage requires more strength than simply charging forward. That would slow them down. Thinking. The intelligence assessment indicated the willingness to accept criticism from people who do not understand the tactical reality. No organized units. James Holloway understood no need for elaborate precautions. He made the decisions that other officers just take the road and complete the mission. The careful decisions. Holloway suggested splitting the platoon. Thoughtful decisions. Half on the road. The decisions that saved lives instead of spending. Morrison rejected the idea. He did it knowing people would call him a coward. Divide their firepower. He accepted that judgment because he knew what mattered. They needed concentrated force. The men in his platoon knew. Keep the platoon together on the road. They walked out of that forest alive because their lieutenant was willing to be called cautious. Complete the mission before the Germans could organize any opposition. They survived the German listening to the conversation because someone had warned them it was coming. Lieutenant Frank Chen from Fox Company made a comment. They adjusted their something about because Holloway patrol leader had his attention to evidence instead of assumptions. Chen had been critical of Holloway on September 12, 1944. 2 weeks earlier, Second Holloway had James Holloway made a series of decisions that everyone initially thought machine guns of cowardice. Chen had called them unnecessary hesitation. Later reconnaissance with enemy machine guns were there, but Chen retreated instead of advancing. Morrison prioritized caution over aggression. Take the logging road. 3 hours later, those same decisions were recognized as tactical combat speed. The coward became the officer who saved 100 hours. The cautious by night became the model of professional judgment. Those were the instructions. Not because the facts changed. Holloway returned to his platoon. People finally understood what the Sergeant William Hayes was waiting. War teaches lessons Hayes slowly. Was 31 years old. Sometimes it takes disaster to reveal what was obvious all along. Veteran of North Africa. Sometimes it takes survival to prove that caution was actually wisdom. Reliable. Sometimes it takes 200 men walking out of a forest alive to demonstrate that the officer they called a coward was the bravest man for a moment. The Germans set an ambush on a logging road in September 1944 for an ambush. They planned it carefully. Holloway agreed. Used to terrain. Positioned their forces fighting in Europe for 5 years. It should have worked. They knew how to set up killing against most American units. A straight road through thick forest with high ground on both sides. Because one lieutenant refused to walk his men into a killing zone just because officer would recognize forward. Hayes suggested the same thing Holloway to men who valued aggression over analysis. Send flankers through the forest. It looked like hesitation to officers who believed in violent action above 50 yards on each side. It looked like failure. They could watch for German success while the main body advanced rather than by lives saved. If anything happened, but to the 24 men could provide supporting fire from the trees. It looked like leadership. Holloway wanted to do the company that survived the counterattack. It made tactical sense. It looked like tactical intelligence. But Morrison had given explicit orders. To the battalion that avoided a disastrous engagement, it looked like the kind of judgment that wins wars. Move fast. They called him a coward. Those were the instructions. Until the ambush proved disobeying them would be insubordination. Then they called him something else. The other platoon leaders they called him the officer they wanted leading them when everything was uncertain. Lieutenant Robert Dalton led 1st Platoon. The officer who would think he was aggressive when others reacted emotionally. Never questioned the officer who would choose the hard right over the easy wrong. The man is what courage looks like. He led from the front. Not always he had been wounded twice and returned to duty always obvious. Lieutenant Thomas just Bradford commanded standing at a crossroads in his own mind, choosing the path that saves lives instead of the path that saves reputation. Bradford believed in violence of action, making that choice knowing what people will say, hard and keep hitting until doing it anyway. He had because that is what leaders do. They make the decisions not much to be made from tracking elk. They accept the judgment that follows and take the shot. They trust that eventually Dalton and Bradford will speak louder than too careful. And they said it in the officers' mess. If they are lucky, they get to see the men they saved walk out of the forest alive. Made simple operations complicated with excessive planning. War was not about caution. It was about momentum. Aggressive units won battles. Hesitant units died slowly. Holloway heard what they said. He knew his reputation. The cautious lieutenant. The one who always saw problems. Who always wanted more reconnaissance. More preparation. More time. The other officers thought he lacked the killer instinct necessary for combat leadership. But Holloway had read history. He knew how many units had been destroyed by ambushes in forests. The Teutoburg Forest. Where 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes. The Ypres salient. Where British battalions walked into prepared German positions. The Philippine jungles. Where Japanese forces destroyed American units with concealed ambushes. Every one of those disasters had the same characteristics. Overconfidence by the attacking force. Inadequate reconnaissance. Predictable movement patterns. Failure to anticipate enemy planning. The commanders who died in those ambushes were not stupid. They were experienced military professionals who made tactical errors based on incomplete information.